Dave Beck of Paverson Games and Distilled fame joins the Crowdfunding Nerds to talk about convention advice, organic marketing tips, pivoting when things don't work out, game design challenges when running a publishing company, and tips for dealing with content creators. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
You have my bow.
Am I ad?
That's awesome.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I'm your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined, as always, by Sean and not Rick. In Rick's place, we actually have Dave Beck of Paverson Games, designer of Distilled and Luthier. Super excited to have you. And as it seems more and more common, I've got John, my youngest, in a very fancy-looking scarf, who will be joining us for the podcast. So for all of you that are watching on video, I've got my son on in a little tummy pack thing going on here. So welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, I'm really excited because so to kind of frame the episode, we're planning on talking about Distilled and the success of Distilled, how that was kind of from the very beginning, the marketing build up to the Kickstarter campaign, to what happened afterward, convention appearances and how you handled those things, and then Luthier, which is going to be, I think, even bigger because that really just builds on the success of Distilled. Kind of leveraging the base of the game mechanics and customizing them in a really cool way. So I think that I mean, if it doesn't make $1 million, I'll be a little surprised. I mean,
no pressure, Andrew. Thanks.
Yeah. So it's a failure if it doesn't make at least $1 million.
Cool.
So anyway, the intent is to just kind of draw out some of that knowledge that you have learned through your journey. And so let's kind of start back from the beginning. Maybe you can give our listeners that are not familiar with how Distilled raised, over $500,000 as a very first time project. Help us understand what happened. How did that happen?
I don't know. I know a little bit. I can speak a little bit to that for sure. Yeah, so let's going back in time a little bit, taking us back to, of course, the pandemic when lots of things were tossed on their heads. My entire career and my entire kind of dreams and visions were tossed on their heads too. Right before the pandemic is when I came up with the idea for Distilled. I was actually over in Scotland. I was touring distilleries, sipping whiskey, playing games, and I had this idea for a mechanic that would represent how things are distilled in real life. So that was actually in fall of 2019. I come back, and very soon after that, the pandemic happens, which changes kind of how many of us have decided to do playtesting and interfacing with community. And I really do attribute that's one of the first things I would say. I'd attribute that to some of the success. I was able to participate in cons virtually around the world. I visited UK Games Expo virtually and demonstrated there, Gen Con virtually, areas that I probably wouldn't have done if I had to have physically gone there myself for my very first time to visit a convention. So I think that was the first step in that, is the right place at the right time, or, maybe not necessarily the pandemic being the right place, but still making lemonade out of lemons.
Adapting to your circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was kind of the first part of it. And obviously I could go into great detail, but for this purpose and your question, I think that was the first thing that really contributed to it. Another thing was the subject matter. Whiskey, gin, vodka. Although not everybody, of course, is interested in that because they might not choose to drink for a variety of purposes. There still is a large culture around the world that has that interest in that. And I chose to really try and kind of dive into that as much as I could, from the theme, from the marketing and advertising to the community. I celebrated national days online. It's National Gin and Tonic Day. So I would create these celebrations of days, which I've actually carried over to Luthier as well. So I think that really helped too, connecting the theme that was outside of the realm of games was really important to me. And then I think lastly, the other thing maybe is connected to that, which obviously you all played a part in as well, was helping to build that community, building up to the Kickstarter launch. That existed on Facebook and email, on Discord, even at that time because of the pandemic. And I think that really contributed quite a lot as well, where it was first for almost a year and a half, just me doing quote unquote organic marketing myself. And then working with a company like you all in the last month or two leading up to the campaign to kind of really solidify it. It was almost like I was doing it by hand. I was kind of like pouring a sidewalk by hand, but then I had an actual contractor come in who knew how to pour cement properly for an entire
Awesome.
driveway. And that like built that foundation that I needed to be able to kind of catapult me to what I was not expecting at all. To be very, very clear, my goal was truly, I was hoping for $40,000 to $50,000 and thought it would be amazing if I could get around $150,000. So that would be a dream. So I'm and all on 100% honest, I was never expecting it to do as well as it did.
That's amazing. I think, the overall lesson is that you did a really good job controlling what you were able to physically control as a designer. You play tested properly. You exposed it through that play testing. You picked a good theme that was really underserved, in my opinion. There are games. Most drinking games are actually drinking games, right? Most games about alcohol are drinking games.
Yeah.
Is a better way to put it. And you made a really nice Euro game out of distilling, and then you did a good job integrating theme into marketing, as you shared, and then you worked on building your community. And it's funny because the start of Distilled, I was working alongside you, kind of in my own little world with Deliverance, and you were working with Distilled, and we actually ended up launching at a really similar time frame. But what I'm really kind of amazed about is that you and I followed like really kind of the same blueprint in what it is that we did. So I did about organic marketing for about a year and a half before, I want to say 2019, like January or February. That's when our art started coming in. So I felt like I had things to share. So I would share on Board Game Revolution community, Board Game Design Lab, and a couple of others. And ask, hey, what do you guys think about this, A or B? And, questions like that generally get involvement and whatnot to mainly build awareness and whatnot. And we started earning people into our Facebook group through things like that. And then we started pushing right before, I want to say we started marketing for about 3 months. I don't think 3 months was necessary, but I'd say, like you said, probably about 2 months is what I really, really need. So I could have put the same budget into a 2-month time span and it would have been okay. But yeah, and then our Facebook group was a big piece. Our email list was big, and Discord actually, it only became big when we developed a tabletop simulator mod. I'd like to kind of dive into each of these things, but before we do, I just find it really interesting that you followed that blueprint and got really excellent results. And obviously, your campaign, how much did it make? I want to say it was like $558,000.
Yeah, 549, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's an incredible result for a first timer. And in fact, your campaign as a first time designer was only recently, for our company, our little records, if you will, like Galactic Cruise finally beat it out as for a first timer. But man, I think $550,000 is holy cow for a first time designer. That kind of changes the direction of your life. Like,
Yeah.
so did you, like, before we dive into all the marketing related stuff, that when you raised 550K, you probably received other inquiries for distribution and things like that. What was your print run at the end of the day for that first print run?
So my print run at the end, so I ended up signing a number of different licenses in other languages as well. So if you consider those as well, I was 30,000 games printed, 15,000 English, and then 15,000 scattered across the other languages.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty crazy. And then we did our second print run let's see, that was delivered in February. So about a year later, we ended up doing a second print run. So yeah, it was really pretty amazing with all of that. And it was funny because when I raised those funds, I was kind of in this, felt like I was just in another world, floating cloud nine, whatever you want to say. But it was interesting because, of course, and you might have been through this too, Andrew, I'm not sure, but everyone's, oh my gosh, you've raised $500,000. You're going to quit your job. You have so much money. Like, yeah, guess what, everybody? First off, I didn't touch that money at all. I mean, obviously, I had a little bit of money I needed to pay myself back. It wasn't much, though, at all, luckily. But beyond that, I didn't touch it. I didn't touch it for an entire year until I was able to deliver everything to my backers 100%. Then I could step back and be like, okay. But the funny thing is, at the end of the day, I decided to do my second print run without a campaign. So we released a mini expansion about a year and a half, just this past February. And that plus the print run, I decided to pay for with the funds I still had left over. I wanted to see if I could do that. Now, I'm not sure if I would do that again. If I could, I might have tried to do another Kickstarter. But the amount of work involved with that was too much for me as far as daunting. So I decided to try and do it myself. But what that means is, when everyone says like, oh my gosh, Dave, you must be just filthy rich. Like, no, sorry. Most of the money goes back into I had a lot of issues with logistics as well. I had to switch logistics companies days before I started fulfilling. Wow. So there's a lot of other unknown costs that came out. So I'm very glad I did not touch those funds.
Were you one of those Fun Again fulfillment? Did you?
I was the number one Fun Again person where my games were coming on three cars across Canada on a train, and set to arrive at the Fun Again warehouse in 2 days. And I get a call from Fun Again that says, so in about half an hour, you're going to get an email that says that we are closing and we cannot fulfill your campaign. Like, what? And they were nice enough to me to say, we will fulfill it, but I decided not to. I decided to go to someone else because I knew it would be a mess. So yes, I was the last thing to probably arrive at Fun Again before they closed down.
That's rough. And for those listening that don't understand, Fun Again Fulfillment was a fulfillment company that, is similar to like Bridge or Quartermaster Logistics. Generally, they do North American fulfillment, but they didn't make it through the pandemic. They ended up shutting down because of all of the things that, challenged small businesses at the time. And I who did you end up settling with, QML or Bridge?
Yeah, I decided to go to QML. So, well, actually what I had to do was, and again, this is the stuff you can't predict, right? Fun Again was going to handle North America entirely, as well as my distribution, because they had a small arm. James Takanaka, who's a phenomenal guy, was running their kind of basically consolidation service. So it was a whole package. Like, oh, great, they're fulfillment, consolidation. They're going to handle Canada as well. And so when they closed, I had to pivot. So what I did was I got on the phone with other logistics people to get a couple truckloads down to QML, a couple truckloads up to Michigan to do distribution with Flat River Group. And then I also then struck a new deal with Pick and Pack up in Canada. So essentially I became like logistics operator. But the problem was, one last thing about this, which was really kind of one thing for our designers and creators out there to know. I was told, oh, you should definitely do floor loaded containers, which means there's no pallets. It means you can fit more into the container, which is great. Like, you can fit more into the container, you save more money. Overall, it's about just as safe, maybe a little bit more damages, but not much. And they said, oh, you should totally do this. You're going to save money. You can cut down one container. Well, great. I did that. Well, guess what? When it got to Fun Again, they said, well, we can't. You're going to have to pay us to unload them. You're going to have to pay us to palletize them. And then you're going to have to pay us to load them back up again. So I actually it cost me even more money because of that. So it was just funky that what I had to do to pivot. But again, learning on the job. Every day is a new day for that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's so wild. It's and I remember when we raised, I think, we raised like 300K, 314,000, and then we did more in our pledge manager, a significant amount more. But I did what you did. I paid myself back. I was in some debt. I got rid of that. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to not touch any of this except for I wanted to continue work on an expansion. We had some other things we had to wrap up. It ended up that I actually had to move 1,200 miles with a family of 8, which is now 9. And in the middle, which I didn't expect. And there were so many charges that I just didn't expect. I switched pledge managers, so I used BackerKit, switched to Hive, and had some logistics things that were solved before it came off of the boat, like while it was shipping, but before it came off, and ended up just spending a ton of time saving money that way. But holy cow, it was a lot of unexpected things, unexpected fees everywhere. And at the end of the day, you just need to make sure that you can deliver on time. And I remember when we were at the point where everything was in the hands of shipping companies, and generally, I think UK and the EU were last. Really unfortunate situation with the EU. I ended up doing what you did. I had to split from the stuff from the UK at the UK warehouse, fly it over to Happy Shops, and then fulfill that way. And UK and EU kind of fulfilled at the same time. But after that, it's like, now I can actually list it on my website. But before, I didn't want to list it until people actually got their stuff. I didn't want you to be able to buy something before the backers actually received it. And so it ended up that we finally listed it on the website. And I want to say our bank account dipped to about under $10,000 left, which, for a company like this, it burns money like super fast. So $10,000 is not very much when you've got an artist and a game developer that you're working with to, make the next thing. And, it went back up. We had like 2,500 units left to sell. Thankfully, we were able to just sell those. Generally, like, we ran ads and everything, but we sold like a lot organically. How did that work with you? Like, once Distilled delivered, that was obviously a big, sweat off of your brow, I guess. But where did you sell it after that?
Yeah, great question, Andrew. So for context, the Kickstarter was July 2021. I delivered in March, April 2023. So just over a year ago. So we took a lot longer to finish it, which we knew we were being clear about. We were almost dead on as far as our delivery dates for the Kickstarter. But so when that happened, I was looking at a couple different arms. Just like you, I wanted to make sure that our backers got it first. So across the world, before I started thinking about something else. All that time, though, since I had an advanced copy in probably January or February, I was working with a professional photography firm to photograph all of the work, all of the product, all of the to use on my website. And at the same time, I was thinking about working to put things on my website where it's through Shopify. So the whole thing is something that I control, but then is fulfilled by QML, right? So they're the ones that's connected to them. And then on top of that, of course, I was also by this time, I had signed with Flat River Group, which used to be Impressions. Part of it was Impressions. And so essentially very similar to Fun Again, where it was a consolidator. And for those that don't know, there's, of course, distribution, which is kind of where you want to get. Consolidation is for those that distribution won't give you the time of day, which is me. Like, they don't care about someone with a single title. And so consolidation is like a middle person in between the middle people. So it's me, consolidator, distributor, retailer, which means I'm getting a smaller cut, which is too bad. But eventually, the hope is that you find yourself with a distributor. So that's what Impressions is part of Flat River Group. And so they are representing it to retailers around the country, as well as other distributors. So the big distributors buy from Flat River Group or Impressions, my product. So we've got my own website that's direct, of course. We've got in the US at the beginning. We've got the distributor / consolidator. And then finally, of course, the other big one, especially for that first year, is cons. So I decided to target 2 or 3 different conventions in last year in 2023, specifically knowing that Distilled was just being released to those that were not aware of it, of course, from the Kickstarter, but maybe heard about it somewhere else or got a chance to play it. So those are my kind of 3 specific arms of sales I've been trying to kind of target and continue to as well.
Yeah. Now,
Dave, were you able to get to the UK Games Expo this year? I know you were there last year.
Yes, I did. Yeah. I got to see you last year, Sean. Were you there? I missed you. I didn't see you this year.
I wasn't there this year. No.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. So went back this year, another fantastic show. And I'm just going to put a plug in for all those listening. I really think that that's one of my favorite cons is the UK Games Expo. The people, the environment, everything about it is just so great. So it's one I'm gonna continue to try and prioritize if I can. Obviously, a little more expensive because I gotta fly over there, but still
whiskey shots to every attendee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe that's it too. It's back to the homeland, right, where it all began.
One thing I'd say is I remember mentioning this last year when I saw you and saw your booth. I think your booth is a great example of what to do because when I went there, it was very professional. You had thought about everything. I liked how people could walk in and you had sections where people could play the game, where people could demo and sign up. So I do know that on your Facebook group, I know last year you shared sort of a tour of your space. So people who are listening, definitely go check that out. We'll leave a link in the show notes. But it's just, I think it was a great example of what to do at a con.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just to stand on the shoulders of giants there, I had a chance to go to let's see, Gen Con and Gamma Expo, and Gen Con and Gamma Expo. Specifically, I think Gamma before I ever had a booth. And so what I did there was I spent about an hour walking around and taking pictures of every single booth that I felt was inspiring or interesting, as well as some video. And then I used that, Sean, to kind of think about how I could design and build my own booth. And, it began as a 10 by 10. And then in certain cases, when I'm lucky enough to be able to expand it to a 10 by 20, I have UK Games Expo is particularly awesome because unlike Gen Con, which kind of puts a wall at allowing you to do much with a booth until you get in line and get far enough along, UK Games Expo says, and just like Essen, hey, if you want a booth that size, we'll give it to you. If you want it in the front because you want to pay a little bit more to have a booth that size, we'll give it to you. So my booth was about even closer, Sean, this year to the entrance, and it was equivalent to like almost a 20 by 20. It was like a 10 by 30 booth because it's also more affordable over there as well. So it's again, a really great con for that.
That's awesome. One thing Origins is coming up here. Are you going to Origins?
This year I'm not. Last year I did. It's a good show, but I had to really pick and choose, essentially, honestly, between UK Games Expo and Origins because I am going to go to Essen this year as well. So and Gen Con, and so I kind of had to pick 3 cons, and unfortunately, Origins was the 4th.
Okay,
but I know you're going, right, Andrew?
Yeah. It's my first time there, and so I actually reached out to you earlier for some advice because you're further ahead than I am going to conventions and other things like that. And it's like, how can we do the best job possible, right? And so if you had some quick advice for people that are some of the major things that are obvious are pick this convention, go to that convention. We can talk about booth size, but what are really, really important elements of the booth for you, and what are kind of blunders to avoid? Just quick advice for those listening.
Yeah, good question. So, so first off, for those listening, the basic entry level booth size is a 10 foot by 10 foot space. So essentially 100 square feet, 10 foot by 10 foot space. It's like just a square, obviously. And then usually the next step up is a 10 by 20. A couple tips I would have, if you can, really try and assemble a team that allows multiple people to be there, even at a 10 by 10. I would recommend, for my first show ever was Origins in 2022, where I was doing pre-orders before Distilled was out. And I had a 10 by 10 booth because I wanted to test it out before I had product to sell. I wanted to test it out, and I did pre-orders and I sold t-shirts. And at that con, I made sure to always have 2 people there in addition to me. Now, why that seems a little crazy, but what I find is, as the creator, and you'll get this too, Andrew, you get pulled in all these directions, and people want to come and talk to you, and you might need to go meet with someone. And so having multiple people at the booth is really helpful. Ideally, then you would even allow them to have maybe, we try and shoot for around 5 to 6 hours. You might give them some breaks as well, which means you might stagger some too. So, for instance, and this is going to sound kind of insane, but at UK Games Expo, again, reminding you, there was almost like a 10 by 30 size space. We had 13 people, including myself, working, not all at once.
Yeah.
But all at different shifts. So I have this full spreadsheet of, I work with my developer over in the UK for that one, and I do it myself over here, where everyone's on different shifts on the spreadsheet, taking time off, doing these tasks. So the next of 2 more things I'd say is make sure you have kind of dedicated stations at your space. So Sean had mentioned this a little bit about the one I have at UK Games Expo. Even at a 10 by 10, help to kind of organize that so people understand what they're doing at that activity space. It's almost like when you send kids around to different stations. Is this a demo? Is this a sit-down demo? Is this where I buy things? And if you can kind of keep those separate, it really actually saves you time, because when someone comes up to ask to buy something and you're doing a demo, you can say, oh yeah, come right over here. My associate will help you check out, or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
So that's another one. Really, even in a 10 by 10, you can do that. You can at least divide it maybe by 2, depending on how you're doing it. I think that's another one. Obviously, there's tons of other things I could talk about as far as supplies for your helpers, how you compensate your helpers, all that stuff, which I'm happy to go into detail later if we want. But the other big thing I would emphasize, big thing that I think a lot of people don't think about, and it does take more help. Okay, so I want to preface that, is figure out a way to have games or demos going on somewhere else in the hall, somewhere else at the con at the same exact time. So usually what I try, they don't allow you to do this at UK Games Expo, which is why I get a bigger booth, because then I have games going all the time there. I schedule them. But at Origins, at Gen Con, at those 2 cons specifically, what you can do is you can sign up. You have to do this ahead of time to run game events the entire con all day. So at Gen Con, for instance, I'm running 9 games at once throughout the entire con. So my booth is 10 by 10, but then I'm running 9 entire games, which is times 4 is 36 people, always constantly playing my games. And then, of course, once they're done, they're like, I want to know more. Well, go back to the booth at the back of the hall and go meet Dave, right? So I think that's another important part that people forget about, because oftentimes they're not going to get to your booth. But if you can get another touch point for them to experience the game, see your stuff, and then they see it again, it's that whole idea, as you've talked about many times, like the more times someone sees something, the more likely they are going to be to kind of invest in that thing.
Yeah. And also, one thing that I think is really important is the way with the advice that you just gave about giving people demos in a different location and a booth in a different location. It kind of fits with how people behave at conventions, right? So like when they, my thought is, so we're going to have a 10 by 20 booth with 2 kind of open corners, and I'm going to have 2 demo tables there with people to play. But for 4 people to play, at least that's the thought. We're gonna have 2 other kind of tall tables for like a quick little demo and selling stuff and whatnot. And I think that it's really important for us to get signups that are that understand people are going to leave because they've got other things to do, but they'll come back later and sign up for a slot here or there. And so I was talking to Chris Birch, actually. We were on the phone or just on Zoom, talking about how we should do it. And he actually advised, run demos in your booth, but if you need to, run them elsewhere and then have those people running demos send them to your booth. I think that's a super smart idea that saves a lot of money. At Gen Con in particular, it's also really hard to just get into Gen Con. So like for me, let's say if I was a millionaire, I'd be like, hey, I'll spend whatever I need to spend in order to get a 40 by 40 booth at Gen Con. And they're like, well, hang on a second. We don't have any room for you.
Exactly.
Here's a 10 by 10, go down to the bottom of the totem pole. Right. And so I think that is such a smart way to really leverage the behavior of people at a convention. And I'm definitely doing that. Like when we get into Gen Con, all I'm going to get, unless I'm, lucky or maybe split booth space with someone else that's already established at the convention, I'm going to get a 10 by 10 space, maybe. And I definitely need to take advantage of those demos if I want to get people to actually touch the product. And that's just super, super valuable advice. So,
in terms of talking about those touch points as well, what I was doing as a UK Games Expo, I'd often flip up my phone and go to Board Game Geek and just see a game, what's the ratings and what is the game. So it might even be worthwhile when you're at the conventions running a Board Game Geek campaign for games that are like your game or ones that are maybe even near you. So again, you have those different touch points where they're seeing your game at different locations at the con. When they're flipping up their phone, they're seeing it there. One thing we're testing with one of our clients is the pin drops. So on meta ads, you can, on locations, put a pin drop and then you can select a radius. And we're trying this out with a particular game that has a religious theme. So we're targeting some of the largest kind of mega churches in the US.
Oh, interesting.
We're putting pin drops there, and we're trying to figure out, will that actually have like a good cost per lead? So depending on how that goes, that might be something worth doing as well, where you put just a pin drop on the convention center where the things are happening, and you just advertise, just even if it's a tiny spend each day, like $2 a day, but it might just be that other touch point where when they're checking Facebook, they see your ad again, and
interesting,
might be worth trying out.
Yeah, we did that actually. I remember we did that for a client so we went to the Gamma Trade Expo back in, I want to say 2020. It was the last convention before everything shut down, and there were like half the vendors that were like that pulled out, and half the vendors went. And I remember we did that for one of our clients at the time, which did all the Mint Tin games.
Sure.
And it was actually surprisingly, it definitely moved the needle for them, because it's like, how do you get everybody's attention at a convention? Well, they're all going to be on social media at some point. So with a Facebook ad and a Facebook ads and Google ads, you can kind of do that. And so we put a pin within, like a 1 mile radius of the Reno Convention Center or the Peppermill Resort, which was where Gamma was at the time. And it was pretty cool. It was more, there were clicks that were more expensive and everything like that. But, with a little bit more time to prep, it's mainly like, when they click, where are they going? And they should really be going to a landing page that tells them, hey, we're at this booth at the convention. Here's what you can get and whatever. They wanted to get retailers to come to their booth and, or just, jump on board. And I thought that was a pretty smart idea. So
cool.
But yeah. So then let's kind of get into these 4 things that you mentioned earlier. So these that I think were really great. It's a great blueprint to follow. Number 1, you got the word out via playtesting. The quality of the game. Distilled is a very, very tight, well-made game. And it's really hard to convince people of that when all you can do is tell them, like, this game is great. I was like, yeah, well, you're the designer or whatever, the publisher. Of course you'd say that. But when they actually get to play, I find that they'll give you honor, and they'll be like, wow, this game is great. And that's an email subscriber, an immediate email subscriber. And then, the subject matter and like what you ended up picking, you were passionate about it. I think that's a really important thing. But then you also mentioned like integrating the theme into the marketing and kind of building community. And I find like when we came on board and we're able to start working to drive, Facebook ads into email leads and whatnot that filtered into your community, I find that one of the most important things is a designer, publisher, creator, whoever that is running the show is very involved in the community. And, if you go a place that is dead, I don't know, if you go into a bar that you heard great things about or a restaurant and there's nobody there, it's not very exciting. But if things are happening, if there's live music, if there's entertainment happening, if the, servers are attentive to you and all that, it's much more attractive and you'll remember it in a much more positive light. And I think that your community and the way that you did that really left a great impression on people. Like you said, you had, you celebrated particular days. It's like, oh, this is National Gin and Tonic Day or whatever. And, I think that was really smart. So can you talk just a little bit more about how you leveraged the community and like what you did that actually, I'll use the term move the needle for your people. Like, what did you do that they engaged with? Did it change from Discord to Facebook, or, that kind of thing?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I think one thing I did, speaking about Discord specifically, and you had mentioned this a little bit before, Andrew, was I invest because of the pandemic. I invested heavily into the concept of how can I present this game to people virtually. How can I get them to experience this game virtually? So, of course, many of us, I at the time especially, I went on to Tabletop Simulator. I created the game. But I also realized that due to the nature of this game and the nature of that environment, it can be cumbersome and daunting to many people. My background is actually video game design, so I'm used to navigating a 3-dimensional space and environment like that. But for many people, they're not.
Yeah.
So I realized quickly that I had to create the lowest barrier to entry as possible. So I contacted my good friend Seth Barrier. He's a computer science professor with me at my university I teach at, and asked him if he would be open to scripting the tabletop simulator experience. So he did, and so what it resulted is a very robust, very well scripted mod that allows a lot of the setup and tear down and cleanup to be automated. And I think that really helped quite a lot. Obviously, making that a public mod for people to play too. We're doing the same thing with Luthier as well. And so by that, we would essentially try and schedule at least weekly playtests that we would stream in Discord. And then probably once every month or two, we would also do the same thing and stream it to Facebook. So I really did consider those communities separate, but knew that there's a little bit of overlap with the two and wanted to try and kind of demonstrate that. And so what I post to Facebook, what I post to Discord sometimes is different as well. But to that point about Facebook, as far as what you were asking, connecting with the community, another thing I decided to do in addition to the whole let's celebrate the different drink days and whatnot, which was a lot of fun, was that I deliberately tried to do something about once a month called Whiskey Wednesday with Dave, where I would go on to Facebook Live and I would record just like now, talking, video, all that stuff. And I would usually be, having a drink, whatever it might be, sometimes seltzer, sometimes pop, sometimes whiskey. I would moderate the chat as well. And I would either have special guests on or I would give them updates. And that was kind of like so that's on Facebook. And then also now I stream it to YouTube as well. But then that's almost like a audio visual version of the newsletter. So again, kind of talking about that full circle, right? So much of the content that I'm covering in all of these are somewhat overlapping, like somewhat, but also are new enough or fresh enough that if someone were to watch or connect with two of them, there wouldn't be like, oh, look, Dave's just posting the same darn thing to Facebook as he is to Instagram, which is what Dave usually does when he puts an image on.
Yeah.
So really trying to have that those different venues specific and different enough, but also overlapping enough to have it seem familiar.
Yeah, actually, we had a client that asked us, just sent us an email, was like, how do you guys write a Kickstarter update and then your email lists? Like, what do you send to your email? Like, if you've sent all that information via Kickstarter, like, what do you send via email to your list, right? And what I found that works for me is I give a Kickstarter update on the last day of every month. It's like for the last since we funded, I've given an update, but then so that takes me a long time. And what maybe like 8 hours sometimes, just there's a lot of stuff to say. I talk a lot anyway, and all of that, right? And I want to make it worthwhile. I want to share some art and other things, but then the email, what I found is that used to be the main thing, right? The email used to be the big roundup of everything. Once a month I would send it out, and I found that the email has become so much easier because all I do is we take that Kickstarter update and then we kind of poured it into an email, same sections, generally similar information. And then we'll send the Kickstarter update out like at the end of, on the last day of the month. And then the email will send out like 2 weeks later. And I have new information, maybe updates on the previous sections and other things like that. like, for example, in the last update, May 30th was like, hey, join us for Origins and maybe, you can volunteer. Well, this one, we kind of ported that information into the email. Sean did that for me, but I'm going to change it to come visit us at booth 745 and you can get this free physical scenario book, if you're a Deliverance fan and whatever, right? And that way the information is it's like more current. And it's more nuanced and the content becomes interesting, even though it's similar. And in fact, there are, people that might have backed on Kickstarter that got the Kickstarter update that didn't open it. But and so they actually would find value in the exact same information word for word in the email. So really the only thing we're having to adjust the content for are the people that read the full Kickstarter update, that are hardcore fans, that made sure to read every word. And then they are the hardcore fans of the people that just want a little bit of new information, that are going to read the email. This actually reminds me, back, so I went to San Diego Comic Con, this is a long time ago, for the Warhammer. I was so excited about the Warhammer MMO. And at the time, I can't remember exactly when it was, like 2010 or something like that. So we are all stoked about this Warhammer like panel discussion that's going to happen, and like the kind of the main talking head behind the Warhammer MMO is there. And it was the biggest disappointment because there was no new information shared, none at all. And in fact, it felt like it was almost like a motivational speech where all we wanted was just like one tidbit of new information. Then I would be enough to chew on, and we got zero. And I still remember that to this day, and how upset I was as a fan that I just wasted 30 minutes of time and they just wasted a huge opportunity to get me excited. Like, I would have talked about it on social media, I would have talked about it wherever, but instead I just have this rotten taste in my mouth for, they just like baited me in and gave me nothing,
Yeah.
So I always think about that. Like whenever I share content, I try to think about, like, is this interesting for people? Like, is there at least something to chew on, and I find that sometimes I will take paragraphs away or trim things down when, it's almost like saying, like, the first thing I would like to say is, that is a sentence, or that is the beginning of a sentence that you should remove. Just say the thing. Don't say the first thing I would like to say is. Just say the first thing,
Yep.
And it's that's the type of thing that you cut the fluff out and you keep the meat, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So what is your philosophy on all that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you too. I think that's one area I really could improve on. I appreciated, I think it was maybe a couple episodes ago, you all were talking about emails, and I feel I craft a good email update, but I don't manage my list well. I just kind of send it out to everybody. So that's something I need to improve on. But as far as crafting it, I'm with you. I like to send it out once a month. And with that, I really try and lean heavily on visuals, because I just know people have shorter attention span to just read through something. So I really try and drop visuals whenever I can. I reference things that happened in the past. I reference things that are going to happen in the future as well. I try and keep I do keep a running list of, essentially it's like a checklist throughout the month of, oh, this will be good for the newsletter. This will be good. So that then I can go back, because otherwise I think like, oh, what am I writing about this month?
Yep.
So that's another important one I do. And like you, I take some time with it. I usually do. I don't think I've ever written in one sitting. I sit down, and it usually takes kind of over the course of a weekend or a couple days, where I rough it out, and then I revise it and continue to refine it with images, with links. But yeah, it's a tricky one, because especially now, you've done a good job of demonstrating how you can kind of, I think you were talking about it, Sean, segmenting things out in the newsletter. And I need to learn how to do that a little bit better, because right now I'm sending everything to everybody. And I know that's probably not the best case. I still have a pretty good open rate, but I need to figure out how to do that better, because I think then I can start to direct it, like, here's a Distilled update. Here's a Luthier update.
Mhm.
Here's an overall Paverson Games update. So that's kind of one of my goals moving forward for sure.
That's awesome. I think that, the most important thing is, so I remember I heard this advice that just stuck with me because of who said it. There was this guy, his name is Jim Winkler. He's a high level dude in this multi-level marketing company, and just a big money maker, able to motivate people and lead people. And he said something like, I want to say 15 years ago, that just stuck with me. The most important thing is to do something. Like,
Yeah.
okay, and the context of that was doing nothing is the alternative, right? And so do something that is imperfect rather than thinking about it and paralyzing yourself during in the step of analysis, right? Where
Totally.
you're trying to, oh, I don't want to do it wrong, so I'm just not going to send my email out on time or whatever.
Yep.
Like, perfect is the enemy of good is the way that my coach in wrestling would say it. Just you want to just get reps in, and you'll learn. You need to learn while you earn, or earn while you learn. I don't know.
Well, I want to add on to that too, and I think this goes for anyone out there listening who's a indie publisher, especially or designer, right? I think it's completely okay. In fact, maybe just as important, if not the next thing after doing something, is doing something and showing that you're human. Because I think so many times that I had this happen in my campaign where when something went wrong, you just need to be honest. Sometimes you need, if you made a mistake, let people know, and let people know how you're planning to fix it too. But also just, let people understand that you're a single person trying to do this. My thing I used to always say was when someone would come and yell at me, like a customer, because they're not happy something didn't get, sent to them properly. I'm like, look, I'm a guy doing this on the weekends in my basement, which is 100% accurate. And so I think not using it as an excuse, but helping people just understand the context that you're not a big corporation. You're usually a 1 or 2, 3, maybe max person company. And sometimes, and probably most often, you might be doing this in addition to your full-time job.
Right.
And so being honest with your backers or your customers really helps too, for them to understand and get to know you better and feel like they know you as a person, which you'll see, at conventions and other things when you do connect with them too.
I think that's a really important lesson. And I'll even take it a step further and say that, we were talking about the funding goal where friends are like, wow, you made, over $500,000. You're rich. Well, your backers see that too. And a lot of the time they don't have it's so easy to kind of rail against the corporation. And you are a nameless, faceless corporation to your backers unless you reveal that you're a human. You got to show them behind the curtain. You got to talk to them like you're a normal person. You can't say, our company strives to blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you lost me immediately. And and I just, it's just a big loss. Right. But I love that, bringing the human side in, I can't overstate the value of that for me personally. And, I had a few backers that were, more like transactional backers that were kind of trolling me. They're like, oh, you're just, like, of course, if you are a Christian and you make money with anything, you're a horrid person. You should have given that to charity, and, and you should be homeless and just, preaching the gospel until you die, because that's evidently the only way to do it. So, there are some people like that just are it, but it's actually very, very easy for people to kind of say, well, like, I know that they're trolling you, but they did make a good point about this or that, right? And it's just really important when somebody accuses you of just wanting to make money off of the backs of all these backers, and you're so selfish and evil and whatnot. You actually just need to kind of have others defend you and say, no, they're actually pretty awesome, and they're human, and they're just like us, and that's a really important quality to have, I think, in a company. And I call it the noble sacrifice, where you, Dave Beck, have to be the face of Paverson Games. Paverson Games needs you, to kind of make that sacrifice. We want to have private lives, but as a publisher, you kind of have to open, just let them look in behind the curtain a little bit. They don't need to sit down like in your class at university or something, but they just need to know that Dave is a human with interest and needs and hopes and dreams just like me.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So I would like to bring up something because I think it relates to both of you. You both have developed games around the same time and brought them through crowdfunding. Both are very thematic. But with Andrew, you've kind of dived deeper into your theme and you've continued to create games within the same IP. Whilst with Dave, you've sort of changed gears. Do you want to maybe discuss why that was the case? I'm sure there's many sort of first-time designers who'd be like, oh, I wish I was a Dave right now with something like Distilled, and I just keep on making Distilled games. So what was the sort of thought process behind sort of changing gears?
Yeah, so for me, I'll go first, Andrew. Great question, Sean. I think a lot of people were surprised by that. I think part of this is just in my DNA. It's how I've always been. So my background, I was an artist for a while, did a lot of sculpture, then 3D modeling, game design, animation, and then kind of came into this with tabletop design and publishing. And I've always jumped from project to project, and my stuff has always looked different. And I think it's just because of my nature of being curious about different things. That's one of them. Not necessarily getting tired of something. I still love Distilled, and we're working on expansions and that type of thing as well. But I think it was one of those things where I got really excited about a new idea, a new project, and decided to go for that way. I will say, just to kind of give some context, so Distilled had a mini expansion that was really just part of the game that we knew was too much, and we cut it out. And that was just another region. But then, and that came with the Kickstarter for those that wanted to get that. And then we released it to retail later. So that was a little bit of a longer tail because of the fact that we didn't release it to retail until about a year after the game was delivered to Kickstarter backers. And then we had a very mini expansion, just a 55 card little tuck box, kind of like a deck of cards. That was something that would enhance the game as well as some new mechanics. That was designed by my developer, actually, and incorporated some of the things I had originally designed in the game from way back before I even brought it to Kickstarter, as well as some really new, interesting stuff. So that also was something, that was the one I talked about where we printed that without a Kickstarter campaign. So I have been able to do like a slow burn of Distilled, but while also investing heavily in the new concept of a game. And again, to get to your question, I think a large part of it is my interest in new topics and new ideas, my interest in kind of what's the next big thing, while still maybe continuing to support kind of Distilled expansions as well. And it's proven to be, I think if I could do it over again, I would have done pretty much everything the same. The thing now I'm trying to figure out is if and when we do want to release another Distilled expansion, I don't know when I'm going to have time to do it. I don't even know when I'm going to be able to, but that's the hope, to focus on design of that and publish that too. So that's the trick, is now that I've let another car into my lane, in this case, a truck in the size of Luthier. I'm not sure how I'm going to squeeze more into it, but we'll see.
Yeah. And one thing I maybe could add in quickly as well, which I really like what you've done. Your games are complementary in that they're both about crafting things. They both have a historical setting. So it's easy to jump from one to the other. It's not like you turn around like, okay, I'm going to do aliens versus demons in some cyber.
Very true.
So it means that your current audience can easily integrate into the new game as well. So I think that's very clever how you did that as well.
Yeah, that was definitely deliberate and kind of in line with what the vision and mission of kind of what we want to do at the company as far as theme and mechanics and all that stuff. So
yeah, I think that is a really important point in and of itself. That I chime on Stonemaier games every so often. When you buy a Stonemaier game, you generally know what you're getting. You're getting something that's 1 to 5 players. That is like you do one thing and that's your turn. And it just goes around the table like this. And there are a lot of different ways to make it more interesting. Eventually, like Wingspan, you do the one thing, you pick whatever environment, which habitat you're going to activate, and that's what you do. And then eventually that action becomes it chains and becomes more complicated and interesting. And Scythe, you pick like one of 4 things you do, and you can't pick the one you used last turn, unless you're the Russian faction. I can't remember, but so that's kind of what you get in a Stonemaier game. And a Paverson game is I really loved how Distilled. It seems like the to not meaning the pun, I'm a dad, so I guess I get to do it. The spirit of Distilled is also in Luthier, right?
Yep.
So I think that your fans and your audience, what you're doing is you're teaching them what type of company you are, what type of mechanics, and what type of like weight of the game itself, and what type of experience they can expect from a Paverson game, which is really great. I think it's a big mistake a lot of the time. People go off the rails and like you design this big 4X fantasy space, opera. It's just like, well, that's what is a Paverson game? People wouldn't know, right? Unless it was like distilling whiskey in space,
whiskey in space. Yeah.
but yeah, so I guess to answer the question from my side, we have made a decision to move like further into Deliverance and work on an expansion and make that a really big expansion. And part of the reason is because of time, which you kind of alluded to. I only have so much bandwidth for things. I've got if Deliverance makes $1 million, that's going to be awesome, but I won't be quitting my job. I'm going to continue working in Crowdfunding Nerds, and I'm going to the Deliverance team will like just expand, right? To fit needs and whatnot. But I really don't have the ability to work on two projects at the same time. So I have this other game that is kind of in development, in perpetual development. I'm just calling it Angel Tactics or Angel Arena, where you take kind of the epic, awesome hero customization of Deliverance and you put it into something that's a little bit more like an RTS game. But the problem is that it's like, which one? I can only pick one. So it's either I work on the Deliverance expansion or I work on this one. And anytime that I work on the other thing, it's taking time away from the main thing. And so for me, Deliverance, I see the potential for a lifestyle game where people will play it 50 times a year. And, like Warhammer or whatever. It's strange, but I see a path toward that, and I want to kind of lean into that. But you can only do so much with the time that you have, and also very importantly, the money, right? Like we only have a certain amount of money, and splitting between two different projects or three or whatever, you might just do two projects below average, but if you want to do it right, like you should really focus. And so I think great companies, that's why I totally understand, Days of Wonder, Stonemaier Games, a lot of bigger companies, they're only releasing like one good game a year, right? And versus like Asmodee, which is going to release like hundreds of games, or whatever. It's more like focus and concentrate, and then penetrate really, really hard with that one product, penetrate the market. So,
well, one thing to add on to that too, because you're exactly right. There's only so much time. It's also, you've mentioned this many times on the podcast, and I think it's one of the most common things to hear is that if you're a designer taking your game to Kickstarter, you can kind of kiss being a designer goodbye, because now you're a business owner, you're a publisher. Now it doesn't mean you can't also design. Like you're proving that, Andrew. I'm proving that sort of. But all of a sudden, your capacity for just like 100% design is 10% design and 90% business. And so what I've had to do was, Distilled was entirely designed by me. But Luthier actually is a co-design. A fellow named Abe Burson had been working on this game Luthier for 10 years, quite a long time. It was set in a different time period. I came and lots of very different things besides a single mechanism, kind of the theme. And so I came to him and I had this vision for bringing it back to kind of the classical era in Europe and being historical and authentic, and proposed to him that we essentially design this together, where I essentially take it over from him and I tear it down to its studs and rebuild it. But I could not have designed the game, obviously, from the beginning. It was him doing all that work, building that strong foundation for me to build on top of. And I say that because I'm seeing kind of this transition for me from designer of Distilled, co-designer of Luthier. The future games that we're thinking about publishing are not mine. I am signing other designers because I do not have the capacity right now to be able to say I'm going to design as well. So it really, I think it's smart for you to say I'm going to focus on one world, right, one area, because you can still be invested in that and be able to kind of contribute the proper amount of time. Well, I can't even conceive of kind of coming up with a brand new system right now with all that I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And for me, if I were to sign someone else's game, I've not signed anybody else's game. I have been interested in a few, but it's like I just need to have as much passion as I have for Deliverance as I would that game, I've just thought, why I could, like I could have signed this roll and write. I could have signed this RTS type game. I could have probably done those things, but it just distracted me, more Deliverance, it's like, let's just do that. So, but yeah, it's really curious. Now, I'd love to kind of transition into, so Luthier is your second major project, and I'd really love to kind of glean from you some of the lessons that you learned from Distilled in the marketing and development that you've kind of applied to Luthier. What are you doing differently in Luthier? What are you doing the exact same in this build up to Kickstarter?
Yeah. So yeah, definitely different in the sense that I'm going to say the number one thing that has been looming over me this entire time is this pressure and weight of what I've done before. And now, before, in my first game, I never second guessed myself because I didn't know to second guess myself. I was completely ignorant, and I just did things based on what I thought or what I had heard or what I observed. This time around, I feel like I've got this pressure to say, like, well, I don't know. I did it this way that time or that way. Should I do it this way again? So that's been, I'll just kind of preface everything with that. That's been a major issue, or not issue, but major thing I've kind of grappled with probably over the last year. With that said, I've done much of the same. I had mentioned before, I have tried to do things like celebrate days. So we've got 40 different historical characters in the game and about 15 different instruments. So we're celebrating birthdays of every single character when they come up. So it's like, it's Mozart's birthday, that type of thing. As well as if there's a national instrument day that we can celebrate. I've been able to, just as a side note, work with the artist on the game is Vincent Dutrait, which is my all-time favorite artist. And I told him about this, and it was perfect because then it's a schedule for him to follow as well as an artist. So that's really worked out actually quite well to have the artwork done by that day so that I can celebrate it on social media as well. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 there.
That's awesome.
For some of the other things I'd say that I've done either differently or similar, I honestly have tried to follow somewhat of the same process. I'm trying to kind of update on social media as much as possible. I've got a great community of playtesters in the Discord as well that are working on it. Same thing as before. I'm working with my friend Seth to develop a really robust, well-scripted mod. So really kind of overall somewhat of the same. I think probably the only thing, or one of the big things that's different is last time I ordered and put together the prototypes myself. I worked with the game crafter here in Wisconsin to produce those. This year, or this time with Luthier, I'm actually working with the factory itself to produce them, just to get a little bit higher quality version to be able to present to the content creators. But yeah, overall, besides that, I'm once again doing kind of similar, I think, pre-launch marketing in kind of somewhat of the same vein. Consistently keeping things updated with the newsletter. So I think overall trying to do somewhat of the same thing, but also this time juggling lots of different ones. I've got a developer working on it, a graphic design company, an artist. So lots of different people that are contributing to the project that I'm kind of trying to manage as well. While with Distilled, it was a little smaller team than that as well.
Yeah. One other thing I find is that, when I designed Deliverance the first time around, I had like 5 years before it went to Kickstarter. It was just like, it gets as much time as it needs and whatever. And now it's
exactly.
Like, I have, everything feels like it's going a lot faster. people are working
Yeah.
on it. My artist needs more to do, more to paint. So I have to have that ready. The game developer is like, all right, what new content should I, bring to fruition and or develop on and that kind of thing. So it's like there are now people that it's almost like I'm responsible. So they're getting a paycheck of some kind, whether contract or, generally everybody's contract that works for me, but on Deliverance. But the it's like I'm responsible for using their hours efficiently and making sure that I guess selfishly that I get the most out of their time and whatnot, because the money that I have is finite and it needs to be invested well in order to make the project a success or the best that it can possibly be, and that really I think with the team that I have now, I could have produced Deliverance in about 2 years versus 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is I took me 5 to go to Kickstarter and then 2 more to fulfill it or whatever, right? And so this next one is like it's been probably maybe a year, and it'll be 2.5 years by the time it's finished and delivered and whatnot. Is what I'm estimating. And then the next one is going to be like we'll probably go to Kickstarter a year later.
Yeah.
So we'll deliver, and then like 6 months later, the next Kickstarter, and it's just of course, unless we don't make that much from this Kickstarter, in which case I'll have a smaller team, but
Yeah.
it's just it feels like the ball and the momentum and everything like that is just rolling. And it's like it's become too much for me. One thing I thought I would do is I thought I would manage our own Amazon because I sell stuff, our company
Yeah.
sells stuff, we can do it. And I sold 150 units, was like, this is a huge pain in the neck. Like I'd rather have somebody else selling on Amazon for me and just let them handle it. I'll do marketing and everything. But let them do the marketing on Amazon, let them worry about everything on Amazon. And, it's just, I just need to have more. I mean, I just can't do everything myself.
Yeah,
It's just too
exactly.
much to think about.
I think at a certain point, you need to, as a designer that especially then kind of moves into more of the publisher realm, every day I have to think about, okay, is it like, how much is my time worth? Not from a selfish perspective, but just because, like you said, if I've got a massive plate of things to do, there's only so much I can actually do. So I need to prioritize those things and then think about really being open to the idea of paying someone or losing a little bit of money to allow someone else to do something for me because it's going to free up time for me to be more efficient somewhere else. And that's, I think, one of the probably most important, frequent things that a publisher needs to think about, or a business owner in general, that I think, unfortunately, sometimes they don't. And then they just kill themselves doing it, trying to do everything. So it's a really important thing that is you're not going to learn overnight, that you're going to have to get used to understanding how to kind of divvy those things up and be responsible for some things, but then also trust others or pay others to be able to do those things for you.
Yeah. Now, one other thought I had for you, really, I guess two. I wanted to chat about really something related to the budget of your of Luthier and the marketing and whatnot, and how you're kind of applying that. But then also reviewers. So, what is your strategy for reviewers going into the Luthier Kickstarter? And let me provide a little bit of context for that. So when I started with Deliverance, and also all of our clients, like whenever they go to Kickstarter, I'm thinking you need gameplay video, you need just a general preview, you need to have at least one kind of, I will say, like A-list company, maybe like the Dice Tower that everybody knows, or Man versus Meeple, or Rado, or something like that, that at least people would be familiar with that name. You need to have at least one like that. But certain companies, like for example Galactic Cruise, they're like, hey, this company is covering the solo playthrough, this company's covering, or these reviewers are covering the whatever, like the gameplay and that kind of thing. And I was wondering, did you kind of handpick certain reviewers to do particular things? What is the strategy behind that? Because you only have so many copies, right, that you're getting from the factory.
Exactly. Yeah. So I got, to back up a little bit there, I've, first off, I of course have a really great collection or list of content creators from the Distilled campaign. Some of them I was extremely happy with, some of them maybe not as much. So I kind of kept notes of that, to be knowing that I could reach out to them again. So I actually, this is probably one of the things I geek out a little bit. This could be an entire episode. Geek out a little bit on. I have a spreadsheet that I have follower count, types of content creation they do, obviously their link, how much they might charge if it's a paid preview as well. So it's basically a giant spreadsheet. It's probably got about 200 or so that I've collected over time. And then I've got comments myself on it as well about, certain things. And what I do then is I think about, just like what you said, I think about, okay, I want to have some that present my solo game. I want some to do a quick overview. I want some on this platform, some on this platform. So it's basically a sprinkling of lots of different things, knowing that it's way more than I need to. I ordered 20 prototypes, and I am shipping around 18 or 19 of those. And I have them set up. It's a little bit idealist, but 3 deep. So I have them so that they get that. The first content creator gets it. They have it for a couple weeks. They ship it on to the next one. I pay for that, obviously. And then they ship it on the next one, and then they ship it back to me.
Yep.
So not that I don't know if I'll get to all 3, but I'm hoping. That's the hope, is to get it to them early enough. And then just one more thing about that is I do a couple other things for them too. I usually try and include some little fun freebie in the game for them as well to thank them. In addition to, obviously, many of them I'm compensating. And again, to be clear with everyone, there's obviously a difference between a preview and a review. Yeah. So oftentimes, if it's anytime I'm actually compensating them, it's more like a paid advertisement, essentially. Yeah. While if I'm not compensating them, I fully expect them to be as truthful as they'd like. And that could be good or bad for me. And that's okay. I'm taking that chance, and that's okay. So I send them something as a thank you. I also fully organize the game and label every single bag with printed out images. I write a personal letter to each one, and put it into the box as well. That has a QR code on it that when they snap it, it takes them to a Google Drive folder that has videos I've recorded myself. One that's teaching them how to play the game, one that's teaching them how to set up, one that's teaching them how to play the solo game, and one that's doing just an overall overview. Because I know just some are not going to want to, some are better at watching a video than reading something, or they want to compliment. So I really try as best as I can to make the experience as smooth as possible for that content creator, so that when they get it out on the table, they can either watch the video or read the thing or do whatever. And I really take that seriously, because I know they've got quite a lot. I try and talk with them constantly on email without annoying them with updates, tracking, and that type of thing as well. So there's a lot involved with it, and I would say it's quite the art or dance that involved in it. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important that if you're working with these people to help bring your product to a larger audience, that you show them how professional and how serious you take this. I think is going to maybe go a little bit longer for them as well.
Absolutely. And I think that the relationships that you built, the first wave, and also the name Distilled and generally the reception will make it makes a lot of people more open-minded. I find, with Deliverance, how it was received was received very well, and it got a little bit of buzz and all of that. It makes it a lot easier to ask for things and have tighter turnaround times. It's like, hey, would you like the expansion? I have to, in order to basically justify sending it to you, I have to have a video produced between, within 6 to 8 weeks, and then it's sent off to the next person. Like, are you willing to do that? And a lot of people, because they have, firsthand experience with it now, they're like, yeah, I can do that. I would love to do that. Please send it, But if it was like a first time, product, or somebody that had never heard of me before, they would be a lot less maybe open-minded to just making it happen quickly, right? And so
and I think helps. And for those people that are first timers that are thinking about this, I think I want to be very clear about the fact that this is my second campaign. I've saved up quite a lot of money to be able to make it happen, to send all these prototypes out. I do believe, you're going to need to have a handful of them, but I think it would be great to, if you're a first time publisher or designer out there thinking about a Kickstarter campaign, aim for 5, aim for having 5 prototypes, which would be great. If you can do 3, only afford 3, that's fine too. But do think about the sooner you can get those two individuals, the sooner they can. It's usually about 3 to 4 weeks on average that an individual needs, a content creator needs the game with them to be able to create the content they need. So if you can get it out fast or early enough, there's no reason you couldn't ask them to send that on. They're used to doing that, especially if, of course, you should be paying for shipping there. But so really think about that, and then think about a diverse set of individuals, both from who they are and who they represent, but also the type of gameplay they demonstrate or the type of platform. So really try and think about that as well. And I can't emphasize enough about being obviously professional, but also personal. It's not like I just send one email to 20 people and be like, hey, who wants some Luthier? No, it's more like I'm connecting with each one. I'm talking with them. I'm asking, I might have known them or I know about their work. And so I compliment them about a certain aspect of their work that clearly is not a cut and paste from someone else's, right? It's really important. And I think that stuff stands out to people as well.
That's fantastic. I love that advice. I think personalization to each individual content creator, just enough to show them that you're not just copy pasting, but that you're reaching out for a purpose because you think that they would actually enjoy this game. That has probably made the biggest difference for me in outreach to reviewers. Even if they've said, "Oh no, we can't take this on" or whatever, it certainly avoids the problem of leaving a bad taste in their mouth for the future, right? So, it's awesome.
One shout out to personalization I'll give a friend of mine, fellow designer, Ammon Anderson.
Gnome Hollow.
He just designed Gnome Hollow, or it's just been published, and I've been seeing I think a select number of content creators posting a hand-drawn painted picture of them as a gnome. And so not only is it fantastic viral marketing, he knows what he's doing, but it's also really great. Like, imagine if you are covering, I don't know, probably 100, 200 different titles a year as part of your job, and all of them are just the game, but then this one game you get a framed little portrait of yourself as a gnome. Like, okay, I'm immediately going to give this a little bit more attention because they've given the attention. Those probably took him a little bit of time to make, of course, as well, because they're all handcrafted too. So thinking about how you can do that without like making yourself crazy or anything like that. It's again all about that personal yet professional touch that you can give.
I agree. I think there was Chip Theory Games gave, I can't remember what game it was.
Was it like a sword or something? It was something ridiculous.
They set up a sword. I thought that was so interesting.
I suppose that could also backfire, right? Because I do know like a lot of people in the community board game space were saying, "Oh, is this a bribe? Is this to kind of oil them up a bit?" So
that's a good point.
That could happen. So I think
if somebody sent you a sword, I would appreciate it. But there were, I think the only people that were concerned about that were really mostly concerned about optics.
People, if you don't have swords.
It's like, so it's just, I got a gift. I like this game, but I don't want to, and anyway, so I think Chip Theory Games, they said that they probably wouldn't do that again, but I don't think that it was a failure in any sense. I actually think that it was.
We're talking about it, aren't we?
Yeah, right, right. It was memorable.
But I do think that, I mean, Sean, you bring up a really good point that you got to be careful too. Even though I love the idea of these gnomes, these content creators as gnomes, and I think it worked perfectly because it was personally from him. He's not part of the company. The company is doing the game. He's doing his own thing. I think that is a fair point. You got to be careful about that line. And again, that's why I want to say professional. It's important to kind of keep professional as well,
right?
Even if it is a little personal too.
Absolutely. Well, so I mean, we've run this podcast a long time, and I've been engaged and excited the whole time, and so is my son. He's stoked. But for those watching on video, he is awake and excited. But any last bits of advice that you would have just for those listening that what would you like to leave us with?
I think just somewhat of what I've been saying all along. I think it really goes quite a long way when you show someone your human side. You are personally connecting with your community, especially if you are a designer, a content creator, designer or publisher or a content creator that is kind of on the smaller scale like we are. I think it just being honest, being real, making that personal connection can go so far, while also making sure that you're being authentic about that, right? And I think that as long as you're doing it naturally, it will come off that way. I've never had a problem with that. And I think whether that's through an email, whether that's through a video, a live video at night you do, whether that's through a meeting up with people at a convention, it's so great to allow people to have that connection and see the full suite, the full spectrum of what Paverson Games is or Lone Games is. It really goes a long way. And I just think that the more we can think about reminding people that we are all human and all doing this because we love it, and we love spending time with each other around a table oftentimes, I think that really will kind of come back and pay you back tenfold with that.
That's awesome advice. Awesome words to conclude on. So the last thing I'd like to do before we go and before we have Robert Richard do his thing, tell us where we can follow Luthier. What how do we connect with you? And if somebody listening to this had a question, like how would they contact you?
Yeah. So if you can find pretty much everything at paversongames.com, all one word, Paverson Games. And with that too, we're on the socials mostly with Paverson as the handle. And of course, Distilled's out, and you can find it at a number of cons and friendly local game stores and online. And then, of course, the thing we're really excited about next is Luthier. That's going to be launching on Kickstarter on July 16th. And really excited about that, bringing that to the people, and very much like Distilled, really heavily focused on theme. And the fun thing about that, and why I deliberately chose July 16th, as opposed to a week earlier, which is when Distilled was launched, is because it's going to be overlapping with Gen Con. So which is probably insane. I don't know if I made the right choice there or not, but it will be live during Gen Con as well, and we'll be there. So if you happen to be there too, it'd be fun to swing by and say hi at the booth.
That's awesome. Well, John is upset, so let's have Robot Richard send us out.
I hope I didn't make John angry.
No, I think I don't know. I just think he thinks he's better than us.
It's that time. Yeah, that's right.
All right, Robot Richard, do your thing.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.